Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Tharries Podcast. I'm joined by another very special guest, as usual. I'm joined by none other than EMS Productions.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's a real pleasure. So, as you know, as I just did a little brief with you at the beginning,
Indeed.
we normally talk a little bit about the channel, the person I've got on the channel Origin, how it got started, and just we go from there, really. So,
Okay, cool. So having a think about this because you asked me this before as to where my channel originally started, and technically I've had a YouTube channel where I've been posting videos since about 2012, I think, or something.
Oh, wow.
But those weren't actually Doctor Who related. They were just sort of because I've always just had an interest in video making and all that kind of thing. So I was just kind of making my own silly little things with my friends and stuff. I don't know how much of it's still on YouTube. I can't really remember at this stage. But then I think in about 2014, maybe, I started doing what my channel initially became a little bit known for was unreleased music for Doctor Who and Torchwood. So I used to sort of do a lot more of that than I do now in terms of extracting the music from the episodes and pulling out some of the best bits that were never released on the soundtracks that you could still get relatively clean with doing a lot of editing and stuff with it. And so on and so forth. So sort of through, I think that would have been particularly in series 9 of Doctor Who, I remember I did a lot of that in 2015, and then from 2016 onwards I started doing the videos to camera, which is sort of where my channel I thought I wanted to start talking about Doctor Who, sort of sharing my opinions with the world a little bit more. Whether that was a good thing or not, I don't know, but I decided that's what I wanted to try and do a little bit more of, and then just sort of took it from there and gradually kind of built up my confidence or skills or whatever you want to call it at sort of talking to camera and talking about Doctor Who in a coherent way, hopefully most of the time, and then sort of from there it's just kind of progressed and developed over the last sort of 3 or so years. Obviously this is the third series of Doctor Who I've kind of properly covered on my channel, I'd say, in terms of doing reviews and talking about it and that kind of thing, which started with series 10 and just sort of brought it up until now. Always pleased to be getting the subs and whatnot and making great videos. Really, I just enjoy talking about Doctor Who and then hearing people's opinions about it. I think it's really sort of a fun way to kind of enjoy the show when you can kind of hear all these different people's thoughts on what they thought about it while I'm sharing mine. So that's kind of the long and the short of it, of how it, I guess, initially sort of started and has led through till roughly now.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, I've been, obviously I do a little research on each person I get on, just do my background. And but it looks a bit. I've seen soundtrack uploads from 2014. So you've
some of those were my earlier stuff indeed. When I've sort of moved away from a bit more now, but yes, that's kind of how I initially got a little bit of a following on.
So you're clearly more of a sort of veteran at this than I am. I've only been going for about a year, give or take.
Oh, right.
Probably a little bit more now because I think my anniversary was December, I want to say, I think.
Oh, very good.
So this is actually my first. Series 12 will be the first proper series that I cover the whole way through.
Yes,
Because I basically came at the end of series 11. So
right. I see. And I always find it's quite fun to be able to properly kind of talk through along with the series when there's a lot more people who are kind of interested in the show at the time and looking for videos, and so you get a lot more comments and opinions and things and have those discussions. There's obviously a lot more to talk about because there's new episodes coming out every week, and I feel it's just such a good opportunity, but almost just I find a lot of fun, really, just to be making lots of videos around each episode, theorizing about things to come and all that sort of side of things I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, completely. And it is always interesting, I find, to look at other people's opinions, and maybe sometimes, because I feel like before things like YouTube, I certainly used to wonder, am I the only one who feels like this? On certain episodes, certain sort of series of the show, even.
Exactly.
It's quite interesting to see not only how many people you actually realize agree, but also disagree at the same time.
And get another different perspectives on it, and then think of sort of, I never thought of it that way, when somebody gives a sort of comment about something, and it's just quite kind of, I think, can broaden your opinion on an episode or a series or whatever, just because you can factor in all these other people's thoughts and little bits they picked up that you never even realized. And I think it helps. You could almost kind of appreciate bits of the program more sometimes by sort of finding out little tidbits that you just never noticed yourself.
No, exactly. I completely agree. Obviously, as I said, you started with the soundtracks, then you moved on to more sort of reactions and reviews and all that stuff.
Yes,
which I thoroughly enjoy. I think the first time I watched one of your content one of your videos rather. I don't know why I said content. One of your content. That's terribly worded.
I mean, I guess it technically is content of sorts. I wouldn't really use that word, but you know, we can roll with it. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, no, it's just my grammar. I think it's just because I just got in, so my
my
grammar's not there yet. But it's just, hopefully it'll improve as time goes on. Yeah, the first time I remember watching your content was, I believe you did a Doctor Who video called "Will Doctor Who be cancelled again?" or something like that. I think it was.
Yes.
That was the first time that I saw.
I think it was "Is Doctor Who nearing cancellation?"
Yeah,
I think I did. Yeah. I can't. When did I do that? I can't actually remember. Was it during Series 11 or was it after?
I think it might have been. I think it was towards the end of Capaldi.
Is it that early? Okay.
Double check actually. Hold on. What's the full video title? I can just look up your channel. That would work too. Just have a little Google.
If I can remember. 3rd of Feb 2018. So a couple of months after Twice Upon a Time.
Yeah, a couple of months after.
Which that got nearly 30,000 views. I didn't even know that, to be fair. I remember it having like 10,000, but clearly it went up a little bit. Yeah. I think my opinion, the reason I did that video at the time was because the viewing figures had got so bad and were trending downwards pretty badly at the time. And it was sort of a point of view of if Chibnall's era doesn't work, then the show will probably get cancelled. Was my kind of opinion at the time, at least, I think. Whether that's changed now, that's a good question. I mean, I think the next few weeks in terms of, well, many things like the pure quality of the episodes and alongside things like the ratings are going to be a good sign of where we're at with Doctor Who at the moment. I think it's intriguing. Obviously, we've had Jodie confirmed for another series today.
Yeah.
Or she confirmed. I mean, it was kind of already announced, but nice to hear it come from her saying that that's what's going.
Yeah, because obviously I used to do a report on a lot of the rumour, the speculation, the stuff like that. Something which I regret a little bit now, because as much as those kind of videos, they do well viewership wise, they weren't really the content that personally I enjoyed making as much. I kind of like the current direction that I'm going in now, which is more review based. I think that's where
it is one of the unfortunate things about YouTube and Doctor Who YouTube is that the more dramatic clickbaity type videos or spoilers, leaked filming pictures or whatever, like those sort of things tend to get a lot more views than an in-depth, really well put together review just because of the title or the thumbnal, which is really a shame. And so I think I've got 50,000 views on a 4-minute video called "Is a reboot for Series 11?" when I saw there was one wild rumor doing the rounds that they were going to reset the canon of the show for Series 11, and that got like 55,000 views, and it was a 4-minute piece of me talking to camera, which was not really much effort involved, and it was like, I'm happy it did well, but it would be nice if you guys would actually watch my reviews where I put a bit more effort in, or some other videos that I put more time and work into that are then getting 800 views compared to this one that was 50,000 for very little effort. So
because I can remember having videos about like, Chris Chibnall and Jodie leaving and whatever, and they used to get like 30,000 views, stuff like that, and I was just like,
Chaos in Cardiff.
That was all that thing. I mean, like looking back on it, it was so ridiculous, but I almost felt this weird obligation to believe it in a way, because if I didn't believe what I was saying, then by extension the audience wouldn't believe what
I get that
either. So but I'm glad that at very least I've gone away from that sort of content now, more into sort of criticism. I still cover like I think I still gonna cover news as and when it comes out, and as I think it's big enough essentially. So if say Jodie wears a slightly different color top one day, I'm not going to make a 10-minute video about that.
Exactly. So exactly that. Yeah, I'm the same with that kind of thing. Absolutely.
Whereas some people I feel like they just jump on anything, and I'm trying not to do that, admittedly. Even if
exactly. Like all the most ridiculous tabloid rumor that Rose is returning or something. You make a 5-minute video on it and you get 60,000 views, and it's like,
and then you
you
get like everyone calling you a liar. Then it's just like, I
know it's very sort of, it's got two sides to it. If you do it and get it right, you're looking amazing. If you do it and it's nonsense, which it more often than not is, with the yearly Rose is returning, Captain Jack's returning, David Tennant's returning, that just comes around night on yearly now, I think.
And people make videos on them. Sontaran was returning.
Oh, and it was actually the sniper bot from Ghost Monument.
Yeah. Ironically, I remember it being rumored that That's what's his name? I've forgotten his name. That's bad, isn't it? Sacha Dhawan
Yep.
was good. I remember that being rumored about him being the master, but I didn't report on that one because I thought that was too far fetched.
Yeah, no, I did see that probably in about whenever it first came out. I can't remember if it did the rounds in the summer or it might be in the autumn. But I remember in the depths of Gallifrey base, sadly I do visit that sometimes, was that rumour about Sacha Dhawan becoming the master and turning up. And as soon as I saw him on screen, I was like, cool, he's in. But I still wasn't convinced that it was actually going to be the master until it actually happened. Because even though I had the rumour in the back of my mind, I still just didn't actually believe it was going to be true until he revealed himself. And it was just such a good reveal for that reason, I think.
It was a pretty good reveal, to be fair. And I think that, personally, I think... because obviously I knew him from An Adventure in Space and Time, where he played Warwick Hussein.
Exactly.
And while I thought he was fantastic in that, I wasn't sure how he was going to translate to the Master, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But he did it excellently. I think he's probably one of the best things about this era so far for me.
Yes,
personally.
definitely.
Is his performance, because I personally think he's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the sort of chemistry between him and Jodie is something that works so well on screen, particularly in part 2 of Spyfall, when sort of they had those scenes when they were in Victorian times, whatever it was, when they were with Ada Lovelace, when she had to kneel down in front of him and everything, and those scenes were just so captivating, I think, and it felt so you completely bought into this is the Doctor and the Master. This is these two old, originally friends who have become enemies, and they just played off each other so well, I think. And it just, I really hope that Sacha Dhawan comes back later in the series. Certainly.
I think
he will. I'll be amazed if he
doesn't.
By
the next time the part 2 trailer or whatever it was,
the
coming soon trailer, it has his voice in it, so I would be
exactly.
And it sounded slightly different from in Spyfall as well. So if I had to guess, I would say maybe the finale. If I had to guess,
I would predict. I'm guessing that the finale is going to be the Master and something to do with Gallifrey. I think we don't really know anything much about it, frankly, at this stage.
No,
apart from that,
actually, the Daleks could be involved, because I remember there being sightings of Daleks a little while back. So that could have been for the finale.
I know that the Daleks, well, at least predominantly, are going to be in the special that was filmed at the end of the series.
Oh, it's the special, is it? Okay.
But I'm also starting to be a little bit more convinced of the possibility they may turn up in the end of the last episode, and it may be some sort of cliffhanger ending into the special.
Yeah.
There's no idea when the special is going to air. Like it most likely isn't until next Christmas, which seems a bit silly that it'll be about 14 months since they filmed it to when it actually airs. But that's just the way filming schedules work sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of partly hoping, partly believing they may do a nice cliffhanger ending, because, well, I want to see some of the main cast changed up, I think, for Series 13.
I think I do as well.
I don't think we want the 4 main characters staying the same for 3 consecutive series. That's just too stagnant for a show like Doctor Who that's so focused on change.
The problem that I've had with Series 12 thus far, with the companions-wise, is that Graham was probably my favourite character from the previous series, Series 11, because I thought he just had the most relatable arc.
Yeah.
I think his grieving was just very relatable, very human. Yeah. And I appreciated that a lot. And then in this follow-up series, it's mentioned once, and he feels more like a vessel for comedic dialogue to me in this series. And I think that's a shame, because he felt like such a grounded character in the previous series, to go from that to what he is now, which is more, him saying comedic dialogue, which, don't get me wrong, some of the comedic dialogue is funny, but it's I feel like that's a step down from him sometimes saying comedic dialogue while still feeling like a real person.
Yes, I feel like his role has been significantly reduced compared to Series 11, where in a lot of episodes he was almost like the primary companion, as it were.
Yeah.
Which I think it naturally happens when you've got 3, that one always gets a bit more focus than the rest.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like any episode has had a major focus on Graham yet, whereas some have been more Yaz focused, thankfully, compared to Series 11. And Ryan's had some stuff to do in some places, but it feels like in every episode Graham hasn't really played any significant role that's really influenced or affected the plot in any way. And obviously, as you say, apart from the Grace mention in episode 1, there's not been that was kind of like the end of that storyline, basically. And it's like, we're not going to pick up that anymore. We're moving on from that, which I like, but it means they haven't done anything else with him. They've just kind of left him.
Because something I remember is I watched Spyfall Part 1 with my family on New Year's Day, which is the first time I've sat down with family members for a long time and actually watched the show, because I normally watch it on my own and make notes.
Yep, same here.
But something I noticed is that because they hadn't watched the previous series, one of the things they were saying was, what's the point in Bradley Walsh's character, because he's just kind of there to whinge. Which, looking just at Spyfall on its own, I can't say that's entirely unwarranted, because
no, exactly.
he is just sort of there to be the old man in the TARDIS. And don't get me wrong, I still think he's my favourite personally, but I can understand from a newcomer's perspective being like, well, what's the point? He's just sort of there to complain while the other two actually do stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's one of my fundamental reasons why at the moment I'm very much of the opinion of three companions doesn't work as a concept. That it worked in the 60s, 70s and 80s. It worked in Classic Who, but Classic Who was very different. You had anything from an hour and a half to 3 hours to tell a story,
it's a lot longer.
And to give them the time to send each character off to do something else that's actually involved with the ultimate story. Whereas in 45 to 50 minutes, you just don't have the time to give 4 main characters enough content and things to do to make it worthwhile them all being in there. And then naturally you end up with 1 or 2 left to the side in each episode, and it's clear they decided to focus more on Yaz and less on Graham in this series, and then it makes Graham look like a pointless companion, like Yaz looked a bit like a pointless companion at times in series 11. So that's where I kind of feel it would just be better to lose one of them.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone died at the end of this series. I'm not sure who specifically. If I had to guess, I'd probably say Graham, because
I agree.
He's kind of served his purpose, even though I love Graham and I don't want him to go, because he's probably my favourite character so far. I do think that his character would make the most sense to go, because there's a lot more you can do with the other two. So no, I think that's probably going to be the case. As much as I said, much like they're like, obviously we sort of drifted into series 12.
Yes,
but that's fine.
Sorry, yes,
fine. That's fine. Obviously, that's what people come to my videos in particular for, is the current stuff, really, which I can't say I blame them, because it is quite interesting. I myself, I'm really not a fan of series 11 personally. I can certainly see what they were trying to do with it in some places, but I don't think it was that great. I think I think series 12 has definitely been an improvement. But I still wouldn't call it great, because I still think that in some places it uses a lot of the stuff from previous series that we've already seen. Some of it feels a little bit recycled to me, which I don't mind too much, but it has started to rear its ugly head a little bit more as time has gone on, personally, for me.
No, I did a rewatch of series 11 in the run up to series 12, so I kind of was able to reform an opinion to an extent on it. I mean, it didn't change massively. I think that series 11 is one of my least favorite series of Doctor Who. I'm not going to say the worst, but one of my, certainly down nearer the bottom. And I think that's not... Part of it is down to the fact that there's nothing connecting the episodes and the story in an overall series. I am personally a bit of a sucker for a story arc. I'm not going to try and say otherwise. No, that's fine. So that's why I'm excited about Timeless Child, among other things. But I think it's not just about me liking the idea of it. I think it's fundamentally in 2019, 2020, you need people to come back and tune in and watch your program, and if you give them no reason to every week, then they're not going to. And we saw that in the way the viewing figures just crashed. Well, not that they crashed, but they did decline more than you would like and hope. And I think if it had been an interconnected series where every episode ended on a cliffhanger or something had been leading it through, then I don't think that would have fallen as much, because for half of series 11, you could watch it in literally any order and it would make no difference, apart from the occasional bits to do with Graham and Ryan or Graham and Grace. Some you need to watch in the right order, but a lot of them completely interchangeable. And that's not to say the episodes themselves are generally bad. Like, I will agree there's some not very good ones in there. Serenity Conundrum's really not particularly anything special. And Ransgrav Claws is a complete letdown of a finale. Resolution is the actual finale of series 11, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree with that.
And I think it's written that way, personally.
Yeah, it's even called Resolution.
Exactly that.
The conclusion.
Yeah. But whereas there are some good episodes in there. Woman Who Fell to Earth is a pretty solid opener. It's maybe a bit too long, but it is pretty good.
As you said, I thought Woman Who Fell to Earth showed a lot of promise.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, okay.
And then the Ghost Monument wasn't terrible. It was pretty bland, but it wasn't awful. In Reintroduced the TARDIS, I was sort of it gave you reason to watch then. And Rosa also I thought was really good. But then after that, it kind of went downhill, I think, a bit, until it
I think
picked
for me,
up in the last couple
Ghost
episodes.
Monument was pretty like boring for me personally. I'm not
No,
going to
no.
mince words. I personally found it a little bit boring. I feel like not necessarily the concept was bad. I just think the execution. Same with Rosa. I think the message is important, but I do think the execution was a little bit clunky in places, particularly the villain being very.
Oh yeah, the villain is a waste of time in Rosa,
Very
completely.
cookie cutter.
Completely.
The song at the end for the bus boycott, that kind of ruined that moment for me. If that had been silent, I think that would have been so much more effective to me.
Yeah, it was an interesting, different approach that we obviously haven't really seen apart from Vincent and the Doctor in Doctor Who, of having a sort of pop song playing over a significant scene. In some ways, I like the idea of trying something different, and I don't think, I kind of agree, it didn't ultimately work that brilliantly. It didn't really add anything to the scene. I feel like maybe a sort of a somber piece of Sega Nakanoda music would have worked better. Like nothing too bombastic and out there, but just something very kind of subtle in the background music, as sort of, and almost have like a deafening silence in that moment of her walking, being escorted off the bus and everything. I think that maybe it would have worked better. But they obviously didn't go down that route. And with Ghost Monument, I just think it doesn't have any plot is the problem. It's just, we've got to get from one point to the other, and that is the whole story. And all the threats they talk about, they don't actually show you. And so there's no reason to feel like any concern for the main characters, because they tell us how there's some deadly stuff in the water or something, I think, but we don't see it. They don't put any extra characters in there who they could kill off to show us the threat of it, which I think is the key thing. And I read some of that was to do with budgetary problems. They literally couldn't afford to have anybody else fly out to wherever they filmed it. So that's why it had such a small cast in Ghost Monument. But then I also think that is a problem across, actually watching on my rewatch. I kept noticing on the credits how few names there are on the credits, because so many episodes in Series 11 have such a small cast. It takes you away, has hardly anybody in it. Kablam's a very small cast.
I would say the one that felt the most
Ghost Monument, Saranga Conundrum.
Arachnids felt the most.
Arachnids, yeah.
Sort of crowded, because like obviously you had.
Yeah, you had 8 main characters essentially.
Who else did you have? You had the scientist lady.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
No, I don't know her name. Also, I don't know.
Scientist.
And then Chris Node's character, Robertson, and his sort of bodyguard as well were in there at points. It was just that. I mean, it's bad enough trying to spread dialogue with over 4 characters. Trying to spread it over 7 or 8, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah, something I've noticed with his script, with Chibnall's scripts in particular as well, is that he likes to stuff them with a lot of stuff. Is the best way of putting it. I think this problem is best exemplified in his opener, "Woman Who Fell to Earth." And also the most recent two-parter, Spyfall.
Yeah,
I feel like obviously with Women Who Fell to Earth, you've got to establish a new Doctor, 3 new companions, a new setting, new tone, new music, all this different stuff, a new Doctor costume. It's like a checklist. It's a very big checklist. A new villain that's supposed to be threatening and supposed to a series arc.
That isn't really. It's just villain turns up in episode 1 and episode 10, and that's it.
You've got to set up all this different stuff. You've got to set up, like, obviously Grace's death and how that's going to impact the companions. There was a lot for that episode to cover. Yeah. And I feel like that comes across in the final product a little bit. Even though it's probably one of the stronger Chibnall scripts, it does feel a bit cluttered in places. The same with Spyfall, even though I thought it was one of the stronger ones. You have the Master, you have Daniel Barton and his relationship with his mum that's barely explored. Obviously we get that one line about her liking traditional media, but other than that, it's that scene and then her death. And there's like no in between there.
Yes.
You have obviously the Master coming back, the whole stuff with Gallifrey. You have the 2 historical figures, Ada Lovelace and I can't remember.
Noor Khan.
That's the one, yeah. I couldn't remember her name, but yeah.
No, that's fair enough.
And like, I just looked at how they were utilised compared to, obviously I know Nikola Tesla's episode was about him, but you look at the way those 2 historical figures were utilised compared to Tesla and Edison, and those 2 were utilised a lot better than Lovelace and Khan were in Spyfall. Yeah. And I think that's the problem I have with a lot of his scripts, is just there's too much going on at any one time, and especially with all the different characters as well. I feel like it does sort of feel like you're jumping from one thing to the next very quickly.
Yes, no, yeah, I know what you mean with that. And I think the thing, particularly with some of the episodes of Series 11, is although he might write quite a few main characters in, there's no extras in a lot of the scenes. I mean, it was a problem I noticed a lot in Ranskorav Kolos, that there's no one else in the episode. When they're threatening to destroy the Earth, we don't see anybody screaming on Earth as the ray is surround. Like, you see this ray surround the whole Earth, so presumably it's affecting it in some way. In the RTD era, we would have seen loads of shots of screaming people running around, running away from streets and into their homes and stuff.
And that was a good
and
way
here
of
we're just told that, and nothing else happens, and then you don't believe the threat because you can't see it happening.
Exactly. No, I completely agree. And obviously, I understand wanting to do different things with the show. I completely get it. I totally get it. I understand wanting to put different ideas in, but it's like, do one thing at a time, I think, or at least maybe like two things at a time. Yeah. Rather than trying to do like 5 different plot threads at once, because it just comes across as a little bit muddled, particularly Spyfall Part 2.
Yeah, Spyfall had a big problem with did have definitely a problem with that, of throwing about 1 million ideas into it and trying to find one that sticks.
Because obviously the spy thing basically gets abandoned by the end of Part 1.
Yeah.
Its namesake is basically gone by the time Part 2 rocks around, which it's not a huge issue, but when you name an episode Spyfall, you expect a bit more than just like 10 minutes of them being spies.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think as well the conclusion to that episode is very rushed. It's almost like
completely.
It was like I honestly thought it was gonna be a 3-parter. The way the story was going, I was like, there's no way they're gonna be able to wrap all this up in 10 minutes. It's like and it was just like bullet points. Well, I went back and did a thing, and now the monsters are gone. I also went back and recorded a message for the plane. It's all done off screen, and I was just like,
that's one of Big Tribunal's biggest problems, is this whole idea of show don't tell. He loves to use exposition and expository dialogue to tell you something about an alien world, or at the end about how the Doctor solved this problem, but he won't actually show you it. He won't write to show it. He'll just write to tell you it, and you just have to believe it and engage with it through the dialogue purely and nothing else, which I think is a fundamental problem, which picks up in a lot of his episodes. And I think it also shows that, like, I think some people like to say that Chibnall's kind of quite trying to do something different with the program by bringing in a female Doctor and this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. Where I think in reality, Chris Chibnall's version is arguably the safest version of Doctor Who we've seen so far. It's watered down RTD to an extent. Within Series 11, a little bit of bringing back the 60s. And that's what he's going for. And so I sort of almost want, I think what the show needs and what I want from Chris is for him to actually take a risk and do something completely different.
Well, that's what I'm hoping the Timeless Child
will be. Exactly. Like, I hope that that's bold and risky and changes something, and will probably be controversial if it does change any significant lore. Like, people are going to moan because they do. But I think that will be a good thing for the program, to show it's moving forward by doing something different and changing it. I think, I mean, part of me would want him to almost take a next step of, if it going forward, even like changing the actual format of the program, whether having a sort of 2 5-part stories, sort of that's all one big story or something like that. Just do something different, try things out to see what you can do to engage with the audience better, because there's no denying that, and I'm not a doom monger, I always try to be positive about the viewing figures, but there's no denying that they're going down, and that they're not going to go back up to what they peaked at in Tennant era, or even what they peaked at with Jodie's first episode.
I don't entirely agree. Some people say that, well, they're never going to be as good as Tennant because of obviously digital tech and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I will admit that new forms of entertainment do play a factor, but I don't think it quite excuses some of the figures that we've been having.
No, I agree. I think it's possible to hit Tennant figures. I just think that with the way Doctor Who's been written at the moment, it's not going to happen.
No, I agree. I guess most of it is just not that exciting, other than the Spyfall opener. Like, really think about it. Utopia is basically just the Doctor fending off aliens from a holiday resort, which is a pretty generic Doctor Who plot, if we're being
Yeah, it's just a base under siege story.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, and it's got that global warming message thrown in there, which I personally think is probably the most forced in a political message has been.
Yeah, it's bad.
You know, at least Rosa, like, they built a story around it, and it felt
exactly.
Like it was
And like, I have nothing against Doctor Who being political. It's been political for many years. In like, I watched The Green Death last week as part of my Doctor Who marathon, and like, that's full of stuff about pollution and whatnot, but it's done in a way that doesn't destroy the story. Like, it's a big part of the story, and they're telling you about that, but they're also telling a great story at the same time, and it's not being completely shoved down your throats. So, it's always been political, but it's just doing it in the right way, I think, is the key point, which is what obviously completely failed in Orphan 55.
No, I agree. And even if you took that out, like, there's just some things that you just can't get behind with Orphan 55. I think it probably is my least favorite episode of Doctor Who for a long time. But like,
it was not good.
I mean, I know maybe Battle Around Score is worse. I'll have to like really rewatch Series 11 to decide. But I mean, it was just I just struggle with that one a lot because.
Yeah,
it's almost as if the idea was decent and you had an opportunity to make a Doctor Who story that could have been a lot of fun, and that just kind of didn't. And that's the best way I can put it.
Exactly.
And you know, I think that story could have had some potential. You know, I think if they'd have introduced the global warming thing earlier, and really had that have an effect on the companions throughout the rest of the adventure. Rather than having a big speech at the end, I personally
and then
think that...
obviously forgotten about forever now because they were never going to reference that again, are they?
No, they're not going to reference.
So it's purely a message to the audience. It's nothing even for the companions. Like it's a self-contained thing to that episode that they will never think about again, or at least on screen we won't see them thinking about it again. And it's just badly done ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, it just too often it feels like a lecture. I think's my issue is like. No one likes being lectured to, I think, is the main thing that I think, like, that's why people don't like school. They don't like to just sit down and be told things.
Exactly.
So when you try and do that in what's supposed to be an entertaining show, I don't think it really works.
No, I totally agree.
I don't think it worked that well in Rosa towards the end, where they basically had a PowerPoint slide in the TARDIS, where it was like, this is what Rosa did, and here's an asteroid, and... It was like, as if you didn't get it already.
I was thinking back on that after Orphan 55, and I was like, that's kind of the same thing. And I think that it's not quite as necessarily political. It's more about educating people about who Rosa Parks was and what she did.
Oh no, I've got no issue with educating people. It's just again
like we had in the Tesla episode, for example. That was quite an educational episode.
Tesla
really.
was a lot better though, I think.
But they did it in the right way. Yeah, it was the dialogue was well sort of spread around the episode in terms of facts about him and the different things he created and whatnot. That it didn't feel like info dump at the end of the episode.
The alien was a lot better integrated than the previous efforts as well, because the. In Divas of the Punjab, the aliens are basically just rip-offs of the Twice Upon a Time aliens who take people out of their point of death.
Yes.
It's basically the exact same concept, just a series later.
I do really like that story, but that does let it down. I think like the emotional punch of when I can't remember his name, but the guy gets killed, when we see it off screen, like there does feel like a real emotional punch there, and it really hits quite well for me at least. But yeah, I agree. The aliens are a waste of time in that episode, and
I think my major issue with like things like Demons is that you have. Personally, I like aliens in Doctor Who stories. Personally, I understand. Obviously, historicals were a big part of the show before, but I feel like without the aliens, it just kind of feels like an ITV documentary with the Doctor in it. And
exactly,
I don't.
It's
think
like
it works.
This is we're not in 1964 anymore, and the reason they stopped doing historicals is because nobody watched them, because people didn't like them. It didn't engage with the audience enough. They were consistently the ones getting the lowest viewing figures back in the 60s. So as soon as a new production team came on, they were like, okay, well, we'll just start chucking aliens to any historical stories, and then they got a lot more views. So it's a sign that. Unfortunately, well, not necessarily unfortunately, but it's a sign that you have to have an alien in a historical, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that it ultimately would work nowadays to try and do a pure historical story. Like maybe once, like as a pure one-off, but on a consistent basis, it doesn't work.
It depends what era of history it is as well. It had to be a really interesting point in history. Maybe if you did like the moon landing or something like that could work as a Doctor Who episode. I could see that. But even then, it's in space. So you've got that draw there Whereas,
Yeah, exactly. Whereas you take the alien out of Rosa, I'm not saying it's going to make it like a much better or worse story, but it will. And I'm not saying the white racist chap is any good, but it at least adds something to kind of keep the plot. Well, it does create the reason why Rosa is on the bus and why they have to kind of save the day and everything.
Yeah.
So it does affect the plot and the whole thing with Rosa in that episode. But I think it's just there is a certain way to write in aliens in a good way in a historical story, which I think they got right in the Tester episode.
Yeah. The only thing I would say about the aliens in the Tesla episode is that I do wish that they weren't so similar to the Ragnos. That's the only thing that I wish.
All it needed was one line of dialogue saying,
exactly,
"Oh yeah, we're from a sister planet of wherever the Ragnos are from," like we had with the old Slitheen and Obzorbeloff. Like
that would have been fine.
That's all it needed.
And I'd have been like, fair enough. I'll let you get away with that.
Like I'm just going to believe that as my canon explanation is that they're from neighboring planets.
That's what I like to think as well, because they're literally basically the same creature, other than the fact that the Scorpion one doesn't have weird legs.
Yeah,
which I personally think that she should have had, because it was a lot more visually interesting. But if you're going to do a Ragnos. If you're going to do a Ragnos like rip-off, you might as well go all the way and put the legs in as well.
Well, yeah. Indeed. Do it properly. Exactly that, yeah.
That was my thing. But, overall, I thought that the Nikola Tesla was definitely an improvement. I personally think Spyfall's probably my favourite overall, just because it has the most interesting concepts.
Yeah. And we should say at this point, we've only seen the first 4 episodes. You've probably seen more by now if you're listening to this, but we've only seen 4, so we can only talk about the first 4.
The Judoon one shows promise. I'm interested to see what they do with that. And
have you seen the clip on Twitter?
Which one?
The little trailer saying, "Oh, there's going to be a bigger shock than the Master reveal in this week's episode."
Yeah. I'm not going to get my hopes up for that.
After all, from 55, I know what you mean.
I was just like, oh, okay.
But then this is from the BBC UK rather than BBC America account, so I have slightly more reason to believe them, shall we say?
Yeah, true. I mean, I mean, hopefully something about the Timeless Child. That's what
I think it will be, given that it's co-written by Chibnall as well.
Plus the fact that we're halfway through now.
Yeah, and we haven't had basically anything to do with it for the last 2 episodes. They've got to pick it up again in this episode or the next one, as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, it's not an arc. It's just something introduced at the start of the series and pick up at the end.
Basically.
So I'm pretty sure we will get something in the next week or 2 about it, I think.
That's what I'm hoping. The Judoon haven't been used as an episode on their own, I don't think, since the Martha episode, Smith and Jones.
Indeed. Well, I did it will have gone up by now. It hasn't gone up yet, but I've done a video about the sort of a brief history of the Judoon, so I can tell you all about the Judoon and when they're from. Their only Doctor episode was Smith and Jones, a proper one that was theirs. They also cameoed in The Stolen Earth, in The End of Time, in the Pandorica Opens, in The Magician's Apprentice, and in Face the Raven very briefly. And they had a 2-parter in the Sarah Jane Adventures as well, but that's the only stories they've had. Prisoner of the Judoon.
Yes, one of the Judoons in a police car.
Yes, exactly. That one. Yeah, that's the only other sort of proper story they've had in anything. Yeah. Well, obviously audios and comics and stuff, but I thought visual media I'd go for.
Judging by what I can make out from the trailers, it looks like they're a rebel group of Judoon. Maybe like a sort of defective police force almost.
Yeah, because there's this interesting thing about the fact they have no jurisdiction on Earth, so they're not allowed to do anything on Earth essentially.
Yeah.
Which is why they had to bring the hospital to the moon in Smith and Jones, so they could actually do anything with it and try and find this alien. Because usually their MO is just to find an alien, basically, who's a criminal.
Yeah.
But the fact they're moving to Earth to do that suggests that they're doing something dodgy.
Yeah. I think corrupt police officers would be a good way to go. And that would be an interesting message to put in, that not all police officers are automatically on your side. That if you wanted to do a story about that, then the Judoon would be a great way of incorporating that in organically.
I mean, I know that in Classic Who, they got in trouble for doing that. With Terror of the Autons, actually, was a story where you saw a police officer who turned into an Auton and tried to kill the Doctor, and that got many complaints. Obviously, it was more of a children's show, I guess, back then.
Yeah, I think
they pushed it too far then. But I think nowadays, as you say, you could get away with it, and it'd be quite intriguing to kind of challenge the establishment, as it were.
So that's what I hope for that. The Cyberman episode's coming up. I don't think we know which episode the Cyberman one is.
No, I think, we know that episode 6 is Praxius, which is this one with the birds. That's all I really know about it, and it's on the beach. That's episode 6. Nothing basically is known about episode 7. Apparently, episode 8 might be the Cybermen episode, or something to do with Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. But that's about it.
Which would make sense as the Sidemen
Yeah,
episode.
exactly. And then we know that, well, pretty much Chibnall confirmed that the finale is a two-parter. So episodes 9 and 10, and I think they're both episode 9 and 10 are both written by Chris.
Right.
But the lot up to then are not written by him, apart from a couple of co-writes. So I would predict episode 8 will probably be the Sidemen one, but then I really have no idea what the finale is going to actually be about. Like, as much as I really, really want a proper Gallifrey two-parter where we actually spend a proper amount of time on Gallifrey
like
in a whole big story revolving around that, not like Hellbent, which I don't hate. We can come on to that later. We can talk about Series 9 later because I have lots of opinions about that. But for leaving that aside for a sec, I really hope that we just get a proper, epic, exciting Gallifrey story. I don't believe that the whole arc will be resolved in this series. Jodie basically said that. I think it will carry on. But we will get some sort of revelations and something by the end of this series, I think. And obviously that interesting character from the Coming Soon trailer, played by Ian Gelder, who turns up in the TARDIS. I think if you've seen that one at the end of that trailer. The Coming Soon trailer where we see that chap at the end. That's a guy called Ian Gelder who played the Decker, the engineering chap in Torchwood. And also was the voice of the Remnants, indeed. So that's quite intriguing, and I'm intrigued to see what he has to do with things. I assume he'll turn up in the finale, but we'll have to see that.
For the Timeless Child in the finale, I don't necessarily want to know who it is in the finale, but I at least want an idea of who.
Yes, we need something to go on. He can't leave us with nothing
because as
it's got to go somewhere.
My trailer reaction video thing, I was like, we can't have another situation that was like Silence Will Fall, where we've got to wait 3 series to see the payoff of that line, because it's...
I mean, I do in many ways like some of the stuff that Moffat did, but the kind of time gap it took to reveal some things was a little bit excessive.
It's like the thing is, by the time you revealed Silence Will Fall, all the people who cared
have gone
by that point. So it's
exactly
and
that's the
even
problem.
More true for the current series, I think, is that they've got to try and do stuff whilst they've got people's attention, because I would argue that Series 11 had the most eyes on the brand, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure whether they capitalized enough on the opportunity like they should have, really. They could have done a lot more with the advertising and maybe make it a bit more exciting for viewers, obviously, because this was going to be a reintroduction for a lot of people, or just an introduction, straight introduction for a lot of people.
Well, it showed it. 11 million people ultimately watched episode 1, When We Fell to Earth.
And then you compare that to Spyfall Part 1's rating, I think it got 6 million in the end.
It consolidated, I think, about 6.8, I think, ultimately.
So
which it's lost 5 million viewers between... who gave it a go. I'm sorry, 4 million. Who gave it a go with The One Who Fell to Earth and have not come back for Series 12.
That's like almost half, really.
Yeah, and I would say that you can count some of that to people who are just tuning in because that's that show I watched as a kid and there's a woman in it now. We'll see what an episode's like, and then just don't really care. But there definitely was a portion who would have tuned in and decided it's not the sort of show they like anymore, or they don't like this the way it's going, and so decided not to watch. Like, we can't deny that, as much as I want to be positive about the current era of the show, and I don't think it's going to be the death of Doctor Who or anything like some people will tell you. And unless the Doctor is changed back to a man, that the show's going to end is some of the nonsense that goes around, which is just not going to happen.
The problem with me is that I want to be able to enjoy it. I've been struggling, I think, I want to enjoy it. I don't go into anything wanting to dislike it. I went into Series 11 going, I wasn't like one of these people who's like, well, it's a woman now, you've automatically ruined the entire premise of the show. I was like, I'll give it a chance, I give everything a chance. To be honest, I was willing for anything different, because Series 9 was kind of my decline as a fan.
Oh wow! This will be an interesting discussion then.
Yeah, that will be. We'll get on to Series 9 and another series in a little bit. But I gave it a chance, and I thought One Who Fell to Earth showed some promise. But like week by week, I was just like, oh, okay. Yeah. I was just like, especially with things like the Trump parody and stuff like that. I was just like, I see where this is going. And then next, obviously, Series 12. Obviously, I stuck with it mainly because I enjoy making videos talking about it. But a lot of people don't have that incentive.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
They don't have that incentive to keep watching it.
Yeah.
So for an outsider, if they don't like something, they're not going to keep watching it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're in a position we are now, and I think that even though we'll say, like, obviously the show is fine now, I do think that it is a cause for concern that they do keep dropping as they are, really, a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going to say that, as you said, I'm not going to say that Doctor Who's going to die or anything like that, anything that excessive, but I do think as time goes by, we're going to have to start thinking about it more. And I'm really looking at these figures and going, okay, this isn't good. How can we change it? How can we get people back in? Because that's what I want. I want to be able to enjoy the show, and I want the show to be successful. That's
exactly, yeah, same here.
That's all I've ever wanted from the show. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that this is also like what I was talking about earlier, where Chris didn't take enough risks. He basically said in an interview for Series 12 that he played it safe with Series 11 to try and get people on board, and then would kind of go a bit riskier for Series 12. When I'm like, you should have done the opposite. You should have gone bold and risky when you were going to get a big audience, because people are trying it out again, because it's a new era. By Series 12, everybody who didn't enjoy it is gone by now, and you're not going to attract them back by doing something different and risky now. Like, I think realistically they've got a solid audience base of maybe 5 million in the UK at the moment. I mean, it's varying episode to episode, but I think an ultimate kind of baseline we're hitting is around 5 million, which is perfectly fine and serviceable, and is not going to get the show cancelled. I think that us as fans put a lot more focus on the ratings than actually the BBC do. Yeah, because I really don't think they actually care about it that much. It's ultimately, is it making them money overseas, and as a company? If it is, cool, perfect, and it always will, because it's that sort of brand. It's popular overseas, across the world, merchandise opportunities, everything. Like, it's never going to reach a point where it's losing them money. I cannot see that happening. So why would they stop doing it? Well,
no, I still think it's their most popular, most profitable brand. By
I think Top Gear was, but then obviously Clarkson and co left, and then that fell apart, and now it is Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, even when Top Gear was around, you can't really sell Top Gear toys to people.
Well, no, exactly. You can't. It's got so many opportunities from something like Doctor Who.
No one's going to buy a Jeremy Clarkson action. Like, you aren't going to have little kids, like, it's just not going to happen. Maybe a stick. You could probably get away with selling a stick, but like...
Maybe, but yeah, that's about the limit of it, indeed, yes. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I think we've just got to, like... Obviously, the people who want it to fail will say, oh, look, the show keeps getting less viewing figures. That means it's terrible. That means everything needs to change, or it needs to get cancelled. And it's like...
Well, that's the thing. I often get lumped into the category that, obviously, because I don't like it, and I have made comments on the political stuff before, which I've since taken down because they don't reflect my opinions now.
Okay.
I often get lumped in with the group that's sort of the Bullstruck group. That's sort of those sorts of people. I've since moved away from that sort of thing. As you can probably tell by like more recent content, it's more review based, as I've said. And I actually bring up criticisms rather than just calling everything a diversity hire or whatever. That's a whole separate issue. But in terms of like, I lost my point now. In terms of, I don't want it to fail as much as some people will say that I just look at it wanting it to fail. I don't, because I've wanted Doctor Who to be good for a while, and for me personally, if I'm being completely honest, it hasn't really been fulfilling what I want from the program since about Series 7, Series 8, if I'm being like...
No, fair enough.
Personally, like obviously Series 9 and 10 had their good moments, but for me, I just wasn't as into them as I was. With obviously I started with Tennant and then Smith, and I went back and say Eccleston, and then the classic series, etc. It just didn't appeal to me as much, but that's just me personally, you know. And so it's not even this series in particular I hate, because I don't really like Series 9 either, which is why I think that I'm gathering that you probably get more out of Series 9 than I do.
I think yes. I think I can get a bit more out of it than you might do. Yes.
I mean, maybe a rewatch would help, because I was sort of relatively naive when I first watched it.
So
maybe...
I mean, do you want to go into a Series 9 discussion?
Let's do it. I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm good for this. Well, first off, I should put the context of Capaldi is my favorite Doctor.
Okay.
And probably that the Capaldi era is my favorite of New Who, which is probably not a very common opinion, I'd say, from fans. I mean, there is a section of people like me, but it's more generally people love Tennant or the Matt Smith era, more so. And I think I watched Doctor Who since 2005. Since I was 7 years old, so it's been a while. And I've seen it all, obviously, through all its different iterations and formats. I think the one time I kind of dropped off from it a little bit was Series 7, actually, was kind of the time where so I think it was just the sort of age I was getting to. I was kind of like 15, 16 years old by then, and was just kind of not quite as interested in watching this kind of what was considered uncool show, I guess, a little bit at school.
I do find that
once I got to those years.
I do find it interesting that every sort of fan of the show currently had a drop-off point and then came back eventually. I do find that funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more common. But then I remember watching, it was coming to, well, I watched some of Series 7B. I certainly watched the Name of the Doctor, and then coming towards Day of the Doctor, I remember they were showing, I think, like Tomb of the Cybermen or something on Watch. And I just watched that again, and it got me straight back into the show. And then I watched the 50th anniversary special, and then just sort of was committed again. So anyway, moving on from that, just to give a bit of context on kind of me getting back into the show. So I was kind of getting back into the show and getting more excited about it again as the Capaldi era was starting. I was very much looking forward to a more older, darker, serious Doctor, maybe a little bit more in the vein of the classic series that I'm a very big fan of.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I prefer the classic series to New Who, but I do enjoy a lot of classic.
I'd probably have to watch more New Who. I've watched quite a bit, but I think I need to explore more episodes in order to make a concrete judgment.
Okay.
The problem I have with classic Who is just for a modern viewer, and you might just be able to call me, maybe it's because I'm a Gen Z, maybe. Yeah. But I just think that the pacing sometimes can be just incredibly slow.
Yeah. No, there's no denying like where the Doctor in a New Who would just say something and then we cut to it having happened. In classic Who, they'd spend 5 minutes showing the Doctor in a very slow way doing like testing out some liquids in a chemistry lab or something like that.
Yeah.
And we'd see that whole process going through. And it is just a completely different method of storytelling, and it was for the time, it was very normal at the time. But now we look at it and we think, wow, this is so slow, this is so long. And so I think classic Who can work a lot better watching it in shorter bursts. Like you only watch a couple of episodes of a story at a time, just to kind of not lose your focus and get a bit bored of it. Because sometimes if you zone out 15 minutes, you do kind of lose what's going on. I've found in some classic stories. But yeah, it's still. I think, I would prefer New Who, but Classic Who's pretty much up there. And so Series 8 is good, in my opinion. It's not the pinnacle of the show. I think that Danny Pink's not great and isn't particularly... Well, I think the problem with him is because of his conflict with the Doctor, we have no reason to like him as a character. We only have a reason to like... Because naturally, as a fan, you're going to side with the Doctor, and kind of, if you like that Doctor, at least, you're going to side with them and kind of agree with their point of view to an extent. But then when we have Danny Pink coming in and criticizing him and saying he's like an army general type thing, I found it can just rub you up the wrong way into not really caring about him. And then you have to care about him at the end of the series when he becomes a Cyberman and is dying and all that sort of stuff. Like, I don't think that was done as well as it could have been. But that was Series 8, and I also am a fan of Clara, which is again a controversial opinion. I am aware that's not particularly popular in the world of YouTube to say that she likes Capaldi and Clara. But I did. I didn't, as I say, I don't like Danny Pink, but I thought that Clara was in 7B. She didn't have much to do because she was a plot device. There's no denying that.
Yeah,
but then I think from Series 8 onwards, she got a lot more character, and I really enjoyed the journey that she went through with the Capaldi Doctor, from the point of not accepting him, essentially, because he's not basically the young person that she was attracted to, and going from that and having to deal with that. And like, I've seen people saying, well, why did she react like that when she's seen all the different Doctor's incarnations and regenerations? It's because although she sees and understands the process, they were all just other people. They weren't the Doctor that she basically was in love with in Series 7B, that is then taken away and turned into an old man, which was such a big thing for her to deal with, I think. And it takes a long time. The fallout from that is quite long and extended, but then it's such, I think, a really effective... Sorry, go for it.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that she kind of takes on the role of the audience, because I think a lot of people at that time were like, Peter Capaldi's too old.
There was a lot of criticisms from it. He's not the young, attractive guy that I watch Doctor Who for anymore. So why do I come and watch it anymore? And so we see that in Clara, as you say, in Deep Breath in particular, and where she's like, this isn't the nice, attractive young man anymore. So what do I still want to do this? Do I still want to be there? And obviously then I don't dislike the Matt Smith scene in Deep Breath, but I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, because it just somewhat, having it so late in the episode, just undermines, I think, the Capaldi Doctor is the problem.
It felt a bit overkill. It was almost like, imagine if at the end of the 11th hour, when the Doctor's got his TARDIS back, it begins ringing and Tennant pops out and it's like, hey, sorry to interrupt your new era. I'm still the same person. So don't stop watching if you liked me, if you were attracted to me.
Exactly that. Yeah. It was that weird thing they did there. But then ultimately this arc that we go on with the Doctor and Clara, where, well, she kind of, I think she's pretty much always has a very, very strong affection for the Doctor. That kind of comes out in different ways. She goes through this thing with Danny, but I think ultimately she is actually in love with the Doctor, but maybe she is in love with Danny, but I feel like Danny's sort of the sensible person to settle with rather than the Doctor that she really wants. But obviously all this is kind of done in more subtext rather than said out loud on screen. And then we get to series 9 where they are very much like they're the two best friends with each other that just want to go on fantastic adventures and have the most fun. And I really enjoy the arc where she develops into this character who's so desperate to basically be the Doctor. Obviously, we see that in Series 8 and like in Death and Heaven where she says, I'm the Doctor, and they kind of play a joke of it. I remember there was all this stuff about Clara Who at the time and all that kind of thing going around.
Yeah.
But I can understand people's criticism of it. At some points, it maybe went a little bit too far, but it was down to the arc they were working on of having her reach this point where she basically wants to be the Doctor, but that she can't be because she's a human ultimately. And I think that's the biggest problem for her. And we see that so vividly in Face the Raven when that's honestly, Face the Raven, that ending is such a phenomenal scene, so phenomenally acted between Peter and Jenna. And when she has this line where she says, like, I want to be like you, and he's like, you can't be, and just that. So that's kind of like the realization of that moment of, no matter how hard she tries, she's not a Time Lord. She cannot be like the Doctor. She can't be able to regenerate, indestructible to an extent.
However, I do think that was ruined by a Hellbent,
and
where they basically gave her what she wanted the whole time.
That it's always, Hellbent is a very challenging episode to talk about. Like, I don't dislike it. I think there's two problems with it. First off is the problem of it not being a Gallifrey story, which is what it was promoted to be, which I think is what rubbed a lot of fans up the wrong way initially. Was like the week between Heaven Sent and Hellbent was, wow, we're going back to Gallifrey, isn't this exciting? And then it actually turns into a Clara story halfway through, which I think caused problems because a lot of people didn't like Clara at the time and wanted her to just go. And we've seen her die, and now she's back in an episode. What's going on?
Well, that's the thing. She kept dying and coming back. That's the problem. It came to a point where it was like, just die. I even predicted. I remember this distinctly. I probably mentioned this before on other podcasts, but I used to use, before you all start saying, I used to use Google Plus because I was that person.
Okay, fair enough.
And I remember there was a post, obviously, because I used to follow all the Doctor Who sites, the Doctor Who pages, and there was a post about Clara dying in Face the Raven. Yes. And I posted a comment saying, bet you any money that she will be back for Hellbent. This was before we knew that she was back for Hellbent.
Yes.
And like someone responded to me saying, no, that won't happen. I was like, no, I bet you it will. And then lo and behold, next episode, Hellbent, there's Clara. And I was just like, well, that's the thing. I think it just became so predictable as well. It was like,
I mean, the Series 9 was a spoilers disaster. The Davros leaked months in advance. Gallifrey leaked months in advance. Clara coming back in the last episode was plastered on the front of DWM when they put a picture of her in her diner outfit before Face the Raven even aired. They said on the Graham Norton show before Face the Raven aired, Capaldi basically said, oh yeah, Clara dies in this episode. So they just let the spoilers roll in that series. Moffat's previews of the episodes were quite spoilery, unfortunately.
That's something I will give Chibnall's team credit for.
Exactly. They do a very good job.
Be a lot better at keeping things under wraps. When they need to, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just to finish my point on Hellbent, no, that's okay. That's fine. The actual ending of Hellbent is one of those things where I think that people will have a set opinion that can't really be changed. And that's fine. Like, I can perfectly see every single argument against it, thinking it completely rewrites Face the Raven and makes it irrelevant. Completely get absolutely all of that. I think that part of it is what you think Doctor Who should be about. in terms of should it be a hopeful program or not, because the ending that Clara gets in Face of the Raven is not one of hope. It's of like the consequences of her actions, of her wanting to be like the Doctor, and that it's all going to end up badly.
I think personally worked a lot better for her character, though.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she was one of those characters that shouldn't have got what she wanted. She needed to learn that what she wanted wasn't best for her, and wasn't best for everyone around her, and she paid the ultimate price for that. And I think that's a good message, rather than just saying, well, if you try hard enough, even when it's at the detriment to everyone else, eventually you'll get what you want. I just think the messaging is a little bit iffy, I get the idea of it being hopeful, but I think there's a difference between hopeful and almost it was almost just like it was too good of an ending. I wouldn't
I know what you mean.
If like the resurrection was like a temporary thing, and she was able to say goodbye to the Doctor properly one last time or something like that. I wouldn't have minded that as much, but it was the fact that she basically, even though they say that she'll have to go back to Gallifrey eventually, it's basically immortality, because she can basically travel for as long as she wants and then just head back to Gallifrey. When she feels old and tired and me's gone or whatever, it's like just basically she can go on for as long as she wants. And I just feel like by basically making her an immortal time traveler with a TARDIS and a companion, you basically turn her into the thing that the whole series was telling you that she shouldn't be. And I just think it kind of goes against the message a little bit.
No, I can understand that. No, see, that's an argument that makes a lot of sense. Like that is a coherent argument, which I like. I'm not going to say that that's necessarily the opinion I fully hold, but it's better than people just saying, I hate Clara, I hate ending, I hate Moffat, I hate Al Bent, full stop, without giving any good reason why, because that's a perfectly legitimate reason that I completely understand and get. I think that I would say, I mean, it ultimately, that is a good viewpoint, and I can't sort of smash holes in that because it makes perfect sense. I quite like the hopeful ending to it. I know what you're saying about the fact that she kind of gets what she wants in the end. And I think that whether she should have got that is a difficult question. It's sort of I can really see both sides of the argument on it, that whether she should get what she wants. I think Doctor Who, in a lot of, I guess, previous sort of companions, well, you look at Rose, she didn't get what she wanted, and then she ultimately did get what she wants.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's, if you look at it from that point of view, it's very much following a similar line to what the whole Rose story arc did.
I think Rose was slightly better though, because her being in love with the Doctor isn't necessarily a wrong thing as much. Really? I don't know. But, like, to me, the way I would probably describe it is, imagine if, obviously, Adric wants to go back into the E-space at the beginning of Earthshock. Imagine if they killed off Adric in Earthshock like was planned. And then the very next episode, he's brought back, and he ends up getting someone to fly him to the E-space. It's like, that, to me, is about the same level, basically, because in my opinion, Adric died because well, no one liked him, but also the fact
indeed,
but also the fact that he was very sort of irrational. He was almost very self-centered. He was intelligent, but his primary concern was himself for a lot of it. So him actually sacrificing himself for others was a nice ending for his character, and I feel like that would have been undone if you gave him what you wanted. It's the same thing with Clara as well, I think.
No, that's true.
With Rose, it's not, again, I say it's not as bad because, like, her relationship with the Doctor isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I know that they say that, I know Jackie says that, is this what you want forever, just being travelling with the Doctor forever, and it's just you're gonna be this alien woman that no one is not even like Rose Tyler anymore. It's like, that is bad, but I don't think being in love with someone and wanting to be with them is as bad as trying to become someone at the detriment to yourself and other people, to me. and that's how I read it personally.
Yeah. And to an extent, the Clara situation is a reverse of the Rose situation, because Rose gets what she wants in terms of getting the Doctor and being able to be in love with him, which is basically what Clara feels towards the 12th Doctor. But she doesn't get the travelling, which Clara does get. So it's sort of one gets one thing they wanted and doesn't get the other thing, and then it's the other way around for the other one. To an extent, I mean, it's not a perfect. It's not a perfect comparison.
The deleted scene that they were going to include. They were going to give the Meta Crisis a bit of TARDIS.
Oh yes, so he could grow in TARDIS. Yeah. Yes, I remember that. Yes,
so they decided that was. Then she would have literally gotten everything.
Yes, exactly. Then they probably realised maybe that is a little bit too far to go to let them just be time traveling and everything as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm glad they cut that, but
yes, no, that certainly was fair enough. So yeah, I think ultimately the Dr. Clara, 12th Dr. Clara arc is very good, but the ending is very debatable. And you can very much hold a very good argument on any opinion on whether that's good or not for the program. I think that at the time I was a bit surprised with the route they took down it, but ultimately I kind of could appreciate what they were doing and why they were trying to do it that way. I do agree that it does undermine Face the Raven to a reasonable extent. But then it does undermine Face the Raven from Clara's point of view, but it doesn't undermine Face the Raven from the Doctor's point of view. It's one way of looking at it.
Because he still loses his friend, I guess, and like the memory is gone.
So he can't.
But then by Twice Upon a Time. So
yeah, he gets his memory back apparently.
I was just like, oh.
It was a bit unnecessary to do that. But then I guess it's only yeah, I think it was unnecessary. I think it made sense to have her have a cameo because it's what's happened before.
Cameo is one thing.
To change that plot thing is a bit more significant, I think.
I think it would be better if, in his last moments, Capaldi saw Clara and wasn't really sure who she was, but she said something like, maybe like she just said, "Run, you clever boy."
Yeah.
Something like that. Just like that last line, like Amy referenced Raggedy Man. It could be a nice sort of parallel to the 11s.
To an extent, Moffat probably didn't want to write it too similar to Matt's
potentially
regeneration.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I think if writing similarly is to the benefit of the story, then I feel like I'd rather that probably.
I agree. That's very true. So that's that. Then series 10, just as I might as well finish off the Capaldi era.
You might as well. Yeah, go on.
I don't enjoy series 10 as much as series 9. Personally, just series 9 is probably one of my favorite series of the show because of individual episodes that are all, in my opinion, very good within it. I've always really enjoyed the Dalek Davros 2-parter. The Under the Water 2-parter is pretty solid, not best thing ever, but still pretty good. The Girl Who Died is bad for 30 minutes and then good for about 15. The Woman Who Lived is okay. The Saigon 2-parter is pretty good with the speech making it as a story. Suit More's terrible. Face the Raven is really good with an excellent ending that's then undermined. Heaven Sent is my favorite episode of all time. And then Hellbent I don't think it's as terrible as most people think. So it kind of overall creates with the arc and the Dr. Clara relationship creates that to probably be one of my favorite series of New Who, which is not a popular opinion, but it is my opinion. Yes. So then we got series 10. I mean, just quickly, I assume you don't like series 9 very much?
No, I don't.
I'm not offended. I'm very happy to hear different opinions.
I think for me, maybe it's because I was young. Maybe I need a rewatch of it.
When did you watch it since it?
Well, I've watched episodes since, but when I get what was it, 2015? Yeah. So I would have been 12, maybe 12, something like that. Yeah, wait, 12. Yeah, probably about 12. Let's say 12.
Okay.
For some reason, I can't math.
I was 17 when that aired.
So yeah, like you could probably appreciate it a lot more. Whereas from my perspective, I was just like, this is boring.
It's a darker, less action-packed, more kind of character and story-focused series that I think has a lot of deeper themes in it and things that probably for a young sort of someone your age who was your age or younger probably wouldn't have got as much out of as some of the RTD stuff, for example.
Yeah, I don't think the Dalek 2-parter was that great, personally.
I think you have to think of it as not a Dalek 2-parter, but a Davros story, and then it becomes better.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I personally think Genesis is a 2-parter as a Davros story, but rather than the Dalek story. But I even as a Davros story, I'm not sure I really think it works personally. I just think that with Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, part of it I think is that unlike in Genesis, I feel like there's too much other stuff going on almost. Like with Genesis, the focus. Oh, you're cutting out a little bit.
Am I?
Oh no, now you're all right. It's just I couldn't hear you for a second. That's okay. Yeah. So with Genesis, obviously the main focus, the mission that they've been sent there to do is avert the Dalek creation or make them less aggressive creatures. Oh, I think that was almost a direct quote. I was quite proud of that. So that's what they've literally been sent there to do. Whereas in the case of Magician's Apprentice, the Doctor's having a midlife crisis, which I personally don't like the whole the Doctor's gonna die thing. This is his farewell tour. It's like it just feels like
that. I know what you mean.
Especially after seeing him get a new set of regenerations in Time of the Doctor, I was like, no, you're not gonna die.
Yeah,
we know you're not gonna die, so don't play with me.
Then David Tennant tells us it feels like dying when you regenerate.
Yeah, that was bad as well, but that's another rant for another day. But yeah, so that I didn't like. I've always found the sonic sunglasses and the guitar incredibly irritating.
Fair enough.
I do sort of agree with the mentality that it is kind of like him trying to replicate Matt Smith, and I just don't think that played to Capaldi's strengths as much.
Yeah,
I think Series 10 was a lot better suited to Capaldi in terms of he's a professor lecturing at a university, he's a figure of authority, he's this ancient wise man. It just makes a lot more sense for an actor like Capaldi as opposed to old man and young man in old man's body.
No, I know. I get
that. I also think that in general, I think the tone of Series 10 is just bad. I still don't even think Series 10 is that great. To be honest.
For me, Series 10, I know obviously I'm saying I love Series 9, but I don't like Series 10 as much in comparison or compared to other series.
I think Series 8's probably my favourite Capaldi season, just because it feels like the most consistent, the most, like, the Doctor feels like the arc feels a lot more consistent. Like, I do sort of also agree with the mentality that Capaldi was pretty much playing a different version of the character with each series that went by. That is.
Whereas
in Series 8, he feels like he's at his most consistent. He's at his darkest, but I think that's what Capaldi excels at. So for me, that works. And there's a couple of gems in Series 8 as well. I think Into the Dalek is vastly underrated.
Oh yeah.
I think you got Mummy on the Orient Express.
That's one of my favourites. That one.
You got Deep Breath, which I also think.
Yes, Deep Breath is terribly underrated.
I think is a pretty good opener. Not nowhere near the level of 11th Hour to me.
No, I wouldn't say that. No, but I just think it's got some great moments in there, like the moment when the Doctor reveals himself and saves the day, and when Clara's like trying to wait for him to appear. I think that's a very, although you do kind of know the Doctor's going to do it anyway, like is going to grab a hand, be there, save the day, whatever. Yeah. It's still just because of what we've seen in that episode so far, it is a genuinely tense moment where you're not necessarily 100% convinced that he is going to be there. In that moment, and then it's sort of like confirming to you this is the Doctor, he's still there to save the day, even if he's not quite the same one you're used to.
Yeah, that's the thing. And also that one scene where does he throw the clockwork droid man? Does he throw him, or does he do something with him?
Yeah, but they leave it open-ended, don't they? He ends up on top of the church spire, and it's left to your interpretation whether he pushed him or whether the droid jumped off themselves.
He just stares into the camera, and you're like, "Oh, damn! This is
a different Doctor. This is not Matt Smith."
But that's still the Doctor. It's just a darker Doctor.
Exactly. You know, it's still the Doctor, and they've shown you that throughout that episode. Just that this is a different take on the Doctor. This is a much darker one. And I think that's why that story works so well, because it in one episode give you what we're going to see for this series in terms of that version of the Doctor.
And I enjoyed a darker take on the character, but it just feels like it almost feels like they degenerated him for Series 9 to me personally. I know a lot of people say that a midlife crisis makes sense for him with a new regeneration cycle, but if that's the case, then why wasn't it at least hinted at in Series 8? It just sort of comes out of nowhere, and I'm just like, it doesn't look
I think we don't know how long the implied time between Last Christmas and Magician's Apprentice is.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Because for us, it was 9 months at the time, or one episode if you're watching on a binge.
Yeah.
Then when it shows up most when you watch it back to back. Whereas it could be from his point of view of being a couple of 100 years or something, for example. We don't really, it's never really spoken on screen as to what that's been. Because then if it's been that amount of time and he's actually done a lot off screen and had adventures and stuff, it maybe would make somewhat of sense. But I agree, it's not ideal the way the character development's done. And then it's sort of almost pulled back in a little bit in Series 10, where it's sort of almost somewhere in between what we see in 8 and 9, I think, his character.
Capaldi's situation reminds me a lot of... funnily enough, it reminds me of Colin Baker's situation, where in the first series they introduced you to a lot more of a harsh Doctor, and then sort of by the end of his tenure, he'd gone sort of almost the opposite way, where he was kind of sweet. And like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the Doctor being sweet, but like, if you're gonna have to like organically work that in rather than just now he's kind, and now he's got a midlife crisis, it's like. You know, it's the same problem Clara had for a lot of her time. It's that she just kept swapping personalities, traits, even jobs.
Yeah.
It was like, one point she's a teacher, one point she's a nanny. Obviously, if you want to count her other incarnations, one point she's a Dalek, one point she's a barmaid. It's just like, they just didn't know what to do with it. And I kind of feel like that's similar with Capaldi. Series 10 I do think is probably the sort of, they tried to do the best of both worlds. With Series
definitely. 8
and 9 they sort of put it together and went, well, sort of had a more balanced one, but I still think Series 8 is better just for the sheer boldness of it, I think. And how different it was.
I think the main thing that brings Series 10 up for me is the finale. Like up to the point of the finale, I would call it a pretty not bad series, but an average series. But then that two-part finale for me is one of the best, possibly my favorite finale of New Who. Certainly right up there with some of the best Doctor Who stories. For me,
I'd say that.
Obviously, the Doctor Falls does carry it off pretty well, better than a lot of finales, because a lot of them have a good first part and then a terrible second part.
I was admittedly disappointed with the Doctor Falls as a conclusion, mainly because the threat of the Cybermen doesn't feel nearly as big and imposing as it should have, really.
It's the thing that Moffat always did, is where he took his finales in the opposite direction to what you expected them to be. They always became very small, character-focused finales rather than RTD, big World War type stories.
But to me, that's like the Rian Johnson effect. Just because you did something different with it doesn't necessarily mean good.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And I think it works better and worse in some episodes than others.
I
some of
agree.
his finales.
I think the Pandorica two-part was pretty solid.
Yeah, that's definitely probably one of his strongest, and at least one of the most well-realised arcs, certainly.
Also, I will say that I think that if they'd have ended, I know that obviously Moffat wanted to keep the Christmas plot, which was all for nothing, really, if you think about it, because Chibnall just abandoned it the following year, so it was all for, it wasn't really worth it in the end. However, I will say that I think it would have been much better if he'd have ended on Dr. Falls.
Yes, if he'd regenerated in that,
which was the original plan. Obviously,
I reasonably liked Twice Upon a Time. I think it's not got loads of plot in it, but it's an all right story. It is an all right episode, and it's the portrayal of the First Doctor is a bit of an issue.
That's
among other things.
That's my issue with it. If they'd have portrayed the First Doctor more faithfully, then I think it would have just been a nice bit of sort of fluff to end off the era sort of thing. Taking it back to where it all began. It could have been nice. But I just feel like that ruined it a little bit for me. Also, I do feel like because you bring back another Doctor on what's supposed to be
this Doctor's last episode.
This Doctor's last episode, it kind of takes the focus away from Capaldi a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
And I feel like if you were going to do a first Doctor story, you should have done it earlier on. I think it would have made a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Not necessarily if he was in World Different Time Doctor Falls, but if you could somehow incorporate that into 10th Planet in a way. Maybe you could have them both happening concurrently because you had the time distortion on the ship or something. I don't know. There's ways you could have done it that I feel like would have been more organic than here's the first Doctor, which is what it just sort of feels like.
Yeah, it was a good cliffhanger at the end of the Doctor Falls. I liked it. It was very exciting, and a sucker for fan service that I am, I did love the 10th Planet footage in Twice Upon a Time. Like, I don't think
the recreation was pretty seamless as well.
Christmas Day BBC One, we'd be seeing the 10th Planet being re-shown in little clips. It was quite something,
and it was recreated perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Except they only included about 20 seconds of it when they filmed loads of it, which was a real shame.
Yeah, I think they should have done more of that. I think if it was less focused on the glass people and more focused on the Cybermen, I think that'd be a lot stronger of a conclusion as well. But
yeah,
I understand the want to move away from the Cybermen a little bit after just having a two-parter with them. So
yeah,
it is difficult.
Mm-hmm. And that is also part of the reason why I don't want the Cybermen to be in this series finale, because Series 8 and 10 were Cybermen finales. Not that they were necessarily that focused on them, but they were the alien in that.
Something that I wanted to say in the Series 12 segment earlier, and I'll bring it back because we sort of circled back around.
Definitely.
Was that I hope that the Cybermen episode is fully focused on the Cybermen.
Yes.
They're way too often sidelined.
Like the Master for the last two finales, haven't they?
The Master for the last two finales, and even in some of their solo outings in the RTD era, they felt sidelined. In Doomsday and Army of Ghosts, they're basically sidelined by the Daleks in the second half.
Yeah.
Because Russell D. Davies is obviously clearly a much bigger fan of the Daleks, which I understand, but you couldn't have had one Cyberman kill a Dalek. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Exactly. It just makes them look really weak.
Yeah.
And then you had, what was it? The Next Doctor, which, whilst it was predominantly Cybermen, it did have a lot of focus on, is this the Next Doctor thing?
Yes, the whole Jackson Lake thing. Yeah, exactly.
Which I'm going to say I enjoyed that sort of storyline, but it again was an example of the Cybermen were just the token villain for the episode. It could have been anyone, really.
Yeah.
And then obviously you go into Moffat. He didn't really do anything with the Cybermen in his first series other than they were in Pandorica Opens.
And then in Series 6, they're overshadowed by James Corden.
Yeah, in Series 6, they're like, we got James Corden in Doctor Who, quick,
let's use him to kill them with love.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, God. And also, how does that Cyberman fit James Corden? Like, not to be rude, but like...
I know, but I agree with you. And the Nightmare in Silver, I guess it's a little bit more Cyberman focused, but
even that...
If you have the Doctor playing two characters in the episode,
I also think the tone of that was wrong.
Yeah.
As well, it felt a bit too comedic in places.
Yeah.
Especially because you got, is it Warwick Davis?
Yes.
Yeah. You got Warwick Davis who is more of a comedic sort of person.
Exactly.
I just thought the tone of that one was a little bit too light for what's supposed to be the big grand reintroduction of the Cybermen for the Moffat era.
Exactly that.
Don't get me wrong, I liked the Cyber Planet arc where he's sort of split between the cyber version of himself and obviously himself, the Time Lord version. I liked that, but again, as you said, that took away focus from the new Cybermen.
Yeah.
I also thought that they were way too overpowered, but it was like whenever they got shot or something, they could just upgrade and then 2 seconds later.
But then the problem with doing that is then you have to come up with a ridiculous resolution to defeat them,
which is basically blow up an entire planet, which is way too far in my eyes.
That's always the problem when you make an alien or creature that's sort of indestructible, invincible. It's not impossible to make a satisfying resolution to that story.
Yeah.
I always think can be a problem with the Daleks and the Cybermen, for example.
And then they appeared again in Time of the Doctor, where they were again just basically another token.
Oh, yeah, it was a waste of time. Yeah, complete waste of time. That was.
They were basically non-existent. And also Handles, as much as I enjoyed Handles, kind of like what happened with the Sontarans with Strax.
Yeah, become a comedy character.
Handles kind of made the Cybermen seem less threatening.
Yeah,
that was in the same way that Strax made the Sontarans feel less threatening.
And that's why I want a big Centauran story at some point in the future to reestablish
well.
threat. Like we need one of those. Come on, Series 13, we can do it.
But that also contributed to the downfall of them. Not as much as the Sontarans, but it was still a factor.
Yeah.
And then Series 8, we had Dark War and Death in Heaven, where of course the Master is Missy. Sorry, well, either.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the main antagonist and basically just creates them as a present for the Doctor.
Yeah, that I never liked that. I never liked that at all.
It's like as if the Doctor is going to accept that.
It was a really underwhelming. I mean, I understand it and it does make sense, but it was also really underwhelming.
You clearly don't know the Doctor very well if you think that he's going to accept an army of Cybermen made out of dead people.
Basically, the series arc was the Master was trying to create an army to give to the Doctor to show that they're not that different as people, and it's like, it was just very underwhelming, unfortunately.
And then obviously, what was the next one?
Well Enough in Time, Doctor Falls.
Well, Enough in Time, Doctor Falls. When it's the Masters again.
Yeah, because as soon as you get a multi-master story, that's naturally going to be the focus and not the Cybermen.
And like that's the problem, because a big part of the marketing for that episode was, oh my god, the Mondasian Cybermen are going to be back, and then they were in it for all of excited. Then they were barely in it. It was like, oh, what?
I mean, in some ways, it was probably mirroring what used to happen in Classic Who, where the Masters used to team up with the villain of the week and kind of work with them to try and defeat the Doctor.
Yeah, I understand.
Which is what they kind of brought back a little bit, I think, and those probably was what Moffat was thinking with those two finales.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think it does just devalue them a little bit.
Yeah.
Me. Also, I will say though, well, next time I did like the line where he says it's a Genesis. Specifically, a Genesis Cyberman, and I was like,
that whole last like 5 minutes, that cliffhanger is just golden. It's honestly one of my favorite scenes.
I do kind of wish that World of Different Time was called Genesis of the Cybermen, because that would have been cool.
Yes, just to have that title would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then I guess it would have given it a. I mean, we already all knew that the Cybermen were in it, so it wasn't really a spoiler.
Yeah.
But
no, yeah, well, John Sim was spoiled as well, so
yeah. But then you could have also called Age of Steel, Rise of the Cybermen, Genesis of the Cybermen. So
yeah, you could have. But I feel like
we've just had several alternative Genesis of the Cybermen because of the way they develop as creatures, basically.
Yeah, that's the kind of problem as well. They don't really have a key origin like the Daleks. And I don't really mind that, because I think the fact that they can come from anywhere is part of why they're so scary.
Yeah, exactly. They're always the humanity goes is they end up becoming Cybermen is kind of the implication.
When their origin gets changed every like a few years, it kind of does become a little bit hard to sort of build a new bond with these Cybermen, especially when they're not the focal point of an episode. Yeah. So obviously in terms of New Who, the Age of Steel Cybermen were on a parallel universe.
Yeah.
And were canonically, I think, weaker than the actual Mondas versions or the Telos versions.
Yes.
And then you had basically in Nightmare in Silver, where they came from a place called Siberia.
Yes, a weird thing like that. Yes,
which is a dumb name, by the way. It's a really dumb name.
Yep. And then the new ones that were created in Well Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls, of course.
That were created in Well Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls that somehow look the same.
Yeah, I mean that's the weird thing, isn't it? Really. And I think just one more thing. I was just actually this brought up with me thinking about the Doctor Falls. Well Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls is that the scene towards the end of the episode where the Doctor is blasting the Cybermen with his sonic screwdriver and shouting continuity references is kind of the epitome of, and kind of decides as a fan whether you like that era or not. Yeah. And it's also what in kind of just the kind of final definition of the fact that became so sort of introspective as an era and became less kind of accessible for a general audience when you've got your main lead shouting continuity references from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. I think that scene was more for Capaldi than it was anything else.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, and I personally like that. But that's because I'm a big fan of the program and look, they referenced that one from that episode, that episode, and I love that. But I know that a general audience just don't have a clue, and he's just spouting on.
No audience members are going to care.
Exactly. So I think that was just kind of a true sign of his last few episodes were kind of fan service to him and to the very big fans of the show, with Mondasian Cybermen and the First Doctor coming back.
Although I
and
was disappointed. I've always been disappointed that they never bring the Tomb ones back because they're my favourites.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed. I mean, it's probably hard to recreate the costume for the Tomb Cybermen, with the little plastic balls on them and stuff like that.
I feel like you could do it.
I mean, they did it with the Mondasian Cybermen, so they should do it.
I just really like the design, and they're just so well utilized in that story. Maybe they shouldn't come back because
I would argue
ruined. But
that Tomb of the Cybermen is still the best Cyberman story.
It is to me.
Even 53 years on, it's still nothing has topped it in the 53 years since. As a pure Cyberman story, at least.
I know people say that some people say they prefer Airshock. Personally,
to
me, Airshock doesn't even come close. It's still a great story, don't get me wrong, but there's something about Tomb that's just so well done. Everything's had the right amount of time. The Cybermen feel like they're not overused to the extent where they lose their sort of scary factor. They're almost like. It's almost like a zombie movie, or like a sort of mummy movie.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of when they're like entombed.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of was some of the origins of that story.
And that works really well.
I think it's one of the ones that is most helped by being in black and white.
Yes, yeah.
I think if that was in color, it probably wouldn't be as good.
No, I agree. I almost think that perhaps Cybermen, I know they wouldn't do it because it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But if they were like in black and white all the time, I know they wouldn't do it. But I think something about their look in black and white.
Yeah, I mean, another one I love is The Invasion, which is in black and white as well. I mean, that's not a Cyberman focused story.
I started watching the Moonbase. I need to watch that one because I like the Tomb Cybermen. So maybe the Moonbase should be my next port of call.
This is pretty good.
So that's what I'm watching right now because I've got BritBox.
Very good. Oh yes, nice. Whole classic Who open to you then, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. So I've been working my way through. I'm just sort of picking the ones that I fancy watching. Doing in order.
That's what I did until like a couple of years ago when I decided I'm going to watch it through from the start. I just used to always pick out random.
Do that. I started doing that, but then I got to a certain point in the caveman story where I was just like, nah, I'm just gonna kind of want to watch the ones that I want. Because...
Yeah. I decided that it's one of those things I want to do as a fan at least once was watch the.
I think I probably will at some point. Maybe I just need to like.
I know it took me kind of a solid 10 years from starting watching Classic Who to actually committing to do a marathon. So it's sort of a long process.
Because I just watched Dalek Invasion of Earth, which is what I always wanted to watch. And it's really good, actually.
Yeah, nice.
This is something I don't understand. We've never had a proper Dalek Invasion story in New Who, in my opinion, other than like maybe the series 4 finale. But even that's kind of focused on the Daleks using the planets as a weapon. I mean, there's a little bit of that in Invasion of Earth as well, but I just don't think we really get to see
pure sort of Daleks invade Earth or Daleks invade a planet type story, has there?
We never really see the full effect of a Dalek ruled Earth in Stolen Earth Journey's End.
No,
we see that house getting blown up, but that's about the extent of it. And that's a shame because one of my favourite elements about that story is just how terrible life becomes for everyone involved. You know, we literally see them as slaves to the Daleks, and it's like, wow, that's it's dark, but it's good. That's what the Daleks should be. You should be scared when the Daleks show up. Yeah, that's something that I think early Dalek stories in the revival did quite well, actually, with Dalek parting of the Way's Journey's End. But as time went on, they kind of became less threatening. I think
it's tricky. It's tricky to find original ideas to do with the Daleks for a start, and I think ultimately Stephen Moffat never really knew how to write them properly.
My idea, obviously, I haven't announced this yet, but I'm hoping that by the time I release this, I'll have at least put a trailer together for this. But I'm working on a new audio series
very good.
Called, I'm calling it Doctor Who Shattered. What it essentially is that, obviously, it's still in its very early stages right now, script-wise, but the idea essentially is that the Daleks, that they take over Earth, because they basically want to colonize it. There's no other motive than that. It's just, they even call it New Skaro, which is like a nice little nod as well. They just want to colonize it, because obviously Skaro got blown up in Remembrance. I know it got brought back in what's it called? Series 9 opener, Magician Apprentice, which is familiar.
Indeed.
But yeah, they basically want to colonize it and then expand their army out. However, the Doctor's on his last life.
Oh, okay.
Last incarnation.
Mhm.
So they don't necessarily want to kill the Doctor because, in the words of Davros, that would be far too easy escape for the Doctor. You know, they want to make him suffer. So what they do is, obviously with the new resources that Earth allows, as well as a lot of time, they managed to create a machine that can basically jettison objects to other universes.
Very good.
So the Doctor essentially gets exiled to another universe. Well, he gets paralyzed first,
right?
Because they want to make him suffer as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why he gets paralyzed.
Right.
And the TARDIS gets damaged as well, so it can't really go as far as it normally can. It can only sort of hop short distances, which kind of puts a limit on what the Doctor can do, really. So the TARDIS gets damaged. I'm thinking probably by special weapons Daleks, because they're the most powerful ones. So he gets exiled with this damaged TARDIS, and the idea basically is that through this event, because the Doctor basically loses due to his own arrogance. By this point, he's become disenfranchised to the idea that anything could pose a threat to him, because he's been doing it for so long. You know, I think one of the opening lines is even something along the lines of, "Oh, they're invading again," or something like that. It's like he's just become so used to it that the idea of them posing a threat doesn't even register to him. So when he loses, he kind of like goes all the way back, to the extent that in this new universe he kind of inspires the creation of the Cybermen.
Oh, I see. Okay, right, wow.
Because he wants to sort of find a way out of his physical state as well, due to the Daleks paralyzing him.
Yeah.
Which obviously I've sort of incorporated a bit of myself into there, being disabled. I was trying to incorporate something a little political, but in a natural way, which is what I've sort of been talking about with you. And I wanted to do another episode where he goes to a graveyard that's weeping angels who died in the Time War. And basically, they're not going to speak, but they're going to like have messages for the Doctor saying, "You killed us." And it's just going to be a really dark story where they basically stalk him and torment him. That's the idea, basically.
Yeah.
And it'll all culminate in a finale in which the Doctor brings Daleks from the other dimension that are more logical creatures. They're still not necessarily good, but they're less sort of kill everything. They're more sort of methodical, more sort of logical, whereas the Daleks very much kill things, get the job done. So then that ends the audio series, or at least the first series, in a big Dalek civil war, which is obviously exciting. Something that I think a lot of people have wanted ever since Remembrance came out.
Yeah, it would be nice to see one of those on screen.
Yeah.
Or in audio, clearly, that'd be good.
That's my basic idea. So my point is that I obviously trying to do new things with the Daleks is difficult.
Yes.
But obviously, what I basically did was try to throw a bunch of old things together and sort of put new things in as well, and just try and make the best thing possible.
Yeah. No. Exactly. And I think just coming back to what we said about the Cybermen.
Yeah. Sorry, I got really sidetracked.
Okay. I was just thinking. I remember, I think it was Chris who said in an interview that he had a very specific idea that he had come up with for the Cybermen, or somebody had come up with for the Cybermen that they wanted to do on the show, which is why he wanted to bring them into the series. And so it sounds like it's not just been a token, oh, well, we should probably bring the Cybermen back, send them back for a while. It's we've got a very specific idea and plot that we want to do with this, so we're going to write it and do it. And I think that's a much better way to go about it than what sometimes Stephen used to do, or maybe Russell as well, where they used to just like, I remember Stephen used to just say to Mark Gatiss, Daleks in World War II, write a story about it. And it's like, it's not necessarily the best way to write a story from.
That's the thing as well, you could have done so much more with the Daleks in World War II.
Indeed. There was,
like, imagine if they'd sided with the Nazis.
Exactly, and then it could have been a complete alternative history and stuff, and that would have been really cool.
Yeah, like imagine if they convinced a Nazi officer that he created them, and then I think it would make more sense because obviously the Daleks were inspired by the Nazis. So having a Nazi create a Dalek would actually make sense. And
Yes.
obviously
Very well,
you
yeah.
can still do the whole role reversal where we're actually, against them the whole time. But maybe the Daleks maybe necessarily don't kill the Nazis, but they maybe say this logic is correct in their minds or something like that. I think there's just so much more you could have done with that story that they just didn't do. Even though I actually think Victory is decent. I don't think it's as terrible as some people make it out.
No, I watched it again probably 6 months ago, and it's an okay story and it's quite interesting to see the Daleks actually win. Basically, I do quite like that because it is, as we say, doing something a little bit different with it, which is always good. But it's nothing special as a story, I think, which is kind of how you describe all of Mark Gatiss' scripts. Realistically, I must say.
Oh, that was it. I just felt the controversy of that statement.
Is that controversial to say that Mark Gatiss hasn't written a brilliant Doctor Who script?
Yeah. I mean, is it that controversial to say that Chris Chibnall hasn't written a brilliant Doctor Who script? Really?
Do you particularly like any of them?
I'd have to remember what they are.
Well, Unquiet Dead, Idiot's Lantern.
I think Idiot's Lantern gets a bad rap.
Okay.
I think that one's a little bit like, obviously I know the Feed Me is a little bit campy, but so is all of Russell's era, really. So it doesn't stick out to me a lot.
I think the best thing that Mark Gatiss wrote for the Universe was Adventure in Space and Time, personally.
Oh, I love it. I watched that a lot, more than I should, probably. I watch it quite regularly.
It's just such a good piece of drama, really.
It
drama.
Is, and I'd like to see more of it. I think a similar documentary on the 80s would be an interesting one when JT was in charge around sort of Colin Baker time. That would be interesting.
I mean, there are some very good pure documentaries on the Classic Who DVD range and Blu-ray range about that sort of thing, which is obviously not a dramatized version, but a pure documentary. But they are very interesting and well put together in giving you a lot of background on what was happening back in those times.
Yeah, I'm going to have to seek some of those out because I love that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's always quite interesting to see. But ultimately, I don't think Gatiss has written anything that's truly great.
Yeah, but I would say the same about Chibnall, and he's the showrunner. So
yes, that is the problem. I think it's certainly nothing. I mean, Spyfall's probably for me the closest he's got to something really good.
I'd agree.
But apart from certainly before he came to showrun it, he'd done nothing particularly brilliant. I mean, I quite like the Silurian two-parter, but
I think that's alright. I mean, it's not that memorable other than the fact that it brings the Silurian back.
But it's okay.
I also like that it's very clearly in Wales, whereas like a lot of other episodes pretend that it's London, which as someone who lives in Cardiff, I'm never fooled by. Because it's like, it's I remember in Spyfall Part 1, the driver says, we're taking you to MI6 in London, and they go through this tunnel, and I'm like, that's the way to Cardiff Bay. But obviously it fools people who don't live here.
I wouldn't necessarily know that offhand without being that into Doctor Who.
And there's another bit in Part 2 where they're supposed to be in, I think, Essex. And it's when Barton reveals their identity to be wanted or whatever, and there's that granny with the iPad. That bit is near Barry Island.
Yeah,
so bits like that I recognise.
Yeah,
so
which kind of ruins the mystery of it. But then that's always been Doctor Who all the way through with quarries and stuff in the classics.
But don't get me wrong, I love that it's filmed in Cardiff and stuff, because I would never want that to change because it is my hometown, and I'm really proud.
It's quite nice to have, yes.
That it's made here. It's something that I think we should all be proud of, that the show is made in Cardiff. But at the same time, when they so clearly try to pass something off as London when it very clearly isn't, it's like
it can get a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's not so bad at night. Right. At night, you can kind of get away with it. In daytime, sometimes it's like, nah, it's clearly not London.
Well, at least we won't have the problem with the Jejune episode, which is set in Gloucester and filmed in Gloucester.
Yeah,
so that's
true.
I've actually, unlike they did where they went to Sheffield and filmed and set it in Sheffield, I quite like when they do that, when you actually believe that's the location, because it really is where they filmed it. I think it's nice that they have the opportunity, but of course it's not possible a lot of the time, and so Cardiff has to double up as a lot of different places and planets and whatever.
Yeah, like the difference is when it has to do planets, is at least that's in a studio, so you can kind of you can kind of manipulate a studio a bit more, really. Whereas like a whole town is hard to sort of alter to what you would want it to look like.
Make it look like London or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah. So I'm to close on the Jadoon thing. I'm hopeful for that episode. If I had to guess, I might say that it might bring in a couple more viewers than Nikola Tesla.
I agree.
And the reason I say that is just because it's bringing back a recognizable villain. And I think the power of recognition and nostalgia is very big.
Nostalgia of an era of, I remember when I was a kid or something, and I remember them back in the day. Oh, I'll give this one a watch. Why not? Hopefully they'll. And I think it's good they put the name in the title because that makes it even more clear for people.
Yeah, and they've been on all over the promotional material as well, so it should be pretty.
Early on about Series 12 was the Jadoon coming back, which was good, I think. So I'm hopeful this should come forward, particularly as Tesla episode was a lot better than Orphan 55, for example. It means at least
it might bump things back up. If it still continues to lower down even after the Jadoon episode, which I can't see as being super likely, if I'm gonna be honest. Yeah. I feel like we might even get a slight bump, or at least they hold steady from the Tesla episode. Yeah. Like the same. Maybe like let's say it gets 4.04 million overnight, which is what I think Tesla got. If it does that, then I think that's fine. But if it gets lower, then I think I'm going to be like, well, what do you have to do to get the ratings higher? I guess maybe the Cybermen might as well, because they're like the second biggest alien in the show. So
history, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're still a way off where, unfortunately, Series 10 dropped down to. I remember the Eaters of Light hit the low point of 2.89 overnight. So we're well over 1 million away.
But at the same time, I feel like a lot more money is being thrown at this series, which is...
Potentially, yeah, that's true.
Because so especially with Spyfall, when you see all the location filming in like Australia and stuff, you're like, wow. But then you and then you see the ratings, you're like, So is it going to be? Are the BBC going to see it as worth it to spend that much money?
It's true. They didn't film in Australia.
Oh, they didn't film in Australia.
That wasn't in Australia.
Oh, well, I was convinced. So
well, there you go. That's good, isn't it?
That goes to show that
they definitely didn't go to Australia because that would be too expensive.
Yeah.
I think they went to South Africa or something like that. I think to do lots of filming and doubling up different places and different things and what. But no, I'm afraid that I mean, I'm glad the illusion caught you, but unfortunately
that did catch me, which is nice. So closing thoughts, because I think we have been going for around, how long have we been going for?
Hour and 40.
Hour and 45, hour and 46,
oh, okay. 25. Well, I guess that gives people hopefully a solid listen. I mean, if you're still listening at this point, thank you for sticking
listening
through lots of rambling and hopefully interesting discussion, but lots of varied discussion on various.
I think it's interesting because I feel like we agree and disagree on a few different things. So
it's good. I like being able to have that kind of debate and discussion with people who are willing to hear other people's opinions and not just shut them down because they have such a strong opinion on one thing or something. And I like that. That's what we're able to do.
So closing opinion, I guess, like to wrap everything up, I think we both we're both hopeful for the second half of Series 12.
Yes.
Obviously we're recording this basically at the halfway point. We're not quite at the halfway point yet, but pretty much.
You're doing an episode.
We're hopeful for that. I think we've said that hopefully the ratings will hold at least steady as to what they are now. What else do we say? Series 9 is something that people have.
Is liked by some and not by others.
Liked by some and not by others. Much like most series of the show.
Well, indeed. And Series 11's a bit more disliked, but
I'd say Series 11 is probably the most disliked series in a long time. Purely because of just the fan backlash that I've seen. But so that's basically it, everybody. I mean, I hope you enjoyed watching this and other podcast. Obviously, I'm trying to get a few more of these out a bit more regularly with different personalities. I'll leave a link in the description to EMS Productions. Be sure to go subscribe. Show them some love, show them some support.
I'm nigh on daily uploading at the moment, so
you're doing well. I need to sort of catch up.
I mean, I'm in a very good position at university where I've got a lot of free time at the moment, shall we say? So I'm able to produce a video a day, and it's at the moment it's going like that. I'm not sure how far through the series it'll hold, but it's going pretty well so far. And so if you want the latest news on Doctor Who, or reviews, or reactions, or soundtracks,
because you do like reactions and soundtracks, but I don't do, so so be sure to go do that, because because I never even thought about uploading soundtracks and stuff. So you
sort of thing. I mean, I'm studying music technology, so I'm very much into that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
I mean, maybe it's because I'm not as into music as I am
exactly
the film side. But be sure to go check out EMS Productions. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you